The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with representatives from 100 different worlds. Massive holographic displays floated above their heads, showing star maps and data streams that moved like living rivers of light. The air itself hummed with translation fields that converted every language into something each species could understand. High Arbiter Zorvan of the Velthari Dominion stood at the central platform. His silver skin reflected the blue lights of the chamber, and his 4 eyes scanned the assembled delegates with the weight of someone who had led this council for 300 years. "We have gathered to discuss the boundary zones," he announced. His voice was deep and carried the authority of an ancient species. "As you all know, these regions of unstable space have claimed millions of lives over the past 10,000 years. No vessel has ever survived entry. No probe has ever returned data. The boundaries remain absolute." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Every species present had lost ships to the boundary zones. These were regions where the laws of physics simply stopped working. Light traveled in circles. Time moved backward and forward at random. Gravity pulled in every direction at once. The greatest scientists of 100 worlds had studied these zones for millennia, and all had reached the same conclusion. Entry meant death. Chancellor Krethan of the Morvaki Collective raised one of his many limbs. His species resembled giant insects with shells of dark green, and they were known throughout the galaxy for their military strength and their contempt for younger species. "Why do we waste time discussing what cannot be changed?" he asked. "The boundaries exist. We avoid them. This has been true since before most species in this room achieved space travel." "Because something has changed," Zorvan replied. He gestured, and a new display appeared in the air. 3 cycles ago, we received a transmission. It came from inside Boundary Zone 7. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted questions and demands. Some laughed in disbelief. Others simply stared at the display with expressions of shock. "Impossible," Krethan declared. "Your equipment is malfunctioning." "Our equipment has been checked 17 times, Zorvan said. "The transmission is genuine, and it came from a human vessel." The noise in the chamber changed. Now it carried a different tone. Confusion mixed with something close to offense. Humans were the newest species to join the galactic community. They had only achieved faster than light travel 80 years ago. Their technology was considered primitive. Their understanding of physics was seen as childlike compared to species that had traveled to stars for hundreds of thousands of years. In the corner of the chamber, Ambassador Megan Clark stood quietly. She was a tall woman with dark hair and calm eyes. She had served as Earth's representative to the Council for 5 years, and she had learned to let the other species underestimate her people. It made moments like this more satisfying. "Ambassador Clark," Zorvan said, his tone careful and controlled. "Can you explain this transmission?" Megan stepped forward. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. She felt their doubt and their dismissal. Like a physical weight, but she had grown used to it. "The transmission came from the research vessel Endeavor," she said. "Captain Sam Harris commanding. They entered Boundary Zone 7 42 hours ago. They have been conducting scientific observations and are preparing to return." "Return?" Krethan made a sound that his species used to express mockery. "No ship returns from a boundary zone. Your captain and crew are dead. What you received was ghost data, electromagnetic echoes bouncing off the zone's edge." "With respect, Chancellor, the transmission included real-time updates," Megan replied. Captain Harris reported stable conditions inside the zone. He described the physics as challenging but manageable. He also reported discovering something at the zone's center. "What did he discover?" Zorvan asked. His voice had lost some of its authority. Now he sounded genuinely curious and perhaps a little afraid. "An artificial structure," Megan said. "Something built by intelligent beings." The chamber fell completely silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. The implications were too large to process quickly. If the boundary zones contained artificial structures, that meant someone had created them. And if humans could enter these zones when no other species could, that meant the youngest civilization in the galaxy had achieved something that the oldest had failed to do for 10,000 years. "This is a lie," Crethan finally said. "A trick designed to make humans seem more important than they are. I demand proof." "Proof will arrive soon," Megan said. "The Endeavor is scheduled to exit the boundary zone in 6 hours. Captain Harris has invited Council observers to witness their emergence. You can see for yourselves that our ship and crew survived." Zorvan exchanged glances with several other senior delegates. The Velthari had lost over 2,000 ships to the boundary zones across their history. His own daughter had died attempting to study Zone 12. The idea that humans, primitive humans with their crude technology and their short lifespans, had succeeded where his people failed was almost too painful to consider. "We will observe," he said slowly. "But I warn you, Ambassador, if this is some kind of deception, the consequences for Earth will be severe." "There is no deception," Megan said. "Only results." She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the delegates began arguing among themselves. Some insisted the transmission was fake. Others worried about what it meant if it was real. A few quietly contacted their home governments to report what they had heard. In her private office, Megan allowed herself a small smile. She opened a communication channel to the Endeavor. "Captain Harris," she said, "the Council has agreed to observe your return. They still think it is impossible." On the other end of the channel, Sam Harris laughed. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and the kind of face that had seen too many impossible things to be surprised by one more. "Then we will have to show them what impossible looks like," he said. "Endeavor out." Megan closed the channel and looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, her people were doing what every other species said could not be done. And soon, the whole galaxy would have to accept that humans did not care very much about what was supposed to be impossible. The countdown to the Endeavor's return had begun. Inside Boundary Zone 7, the universe did not work the way it was supposed to. Stars appeared in colors that had no names. Space itself bent and twisted like a reflection in broken glass. Time flowed strangely, sometimes fast and sometimes slow. And the crew of the Endeavor had learned to trust their instruments more than their own senses. Captain Sam Harris stood on the bridge, watching the impossible view through the main screen. After 2 days inside the zone, he had almost grown used to it. Almost. "Anchor field holding steady at 92%, reported Lieutenant Jake Morton from the engineering station. He was a young man with messy brown hair and oil stains on his uniform. He had designed half the systems keeping them alive, and he talked to the ship's engines like they were old friends. "Navigation still stable," added Lisa Tanner from her console. She was the best pilot in the fleet, with steady hands and a mind that could calculate trajectories faster than most computers. "Though I would appreciate if reality stopped trying to turn us inside out." Sam smiled slightly. His crew handled the impossible with complaints and jokes, which he considered the most human response to danger. Fear was natural, but fear with humor meant they were still thinking clearly. "Dr. Collins," he said, turning to the woman at the science station. "How close are we to the central structure?" Dr. Emma Collins looked up from her displays. She was in her 40s, with short blonde hair and eyes that always seemed to be solving equations. She had spent her entire career studying things that should not exist, and this mission was the greatest achievement of her life. "Approximately 4 hours at current speed," she said. "The structure is massive, much larger than we expected. I am detecting energy signatures that do not match anything in our databases." Sam nodded and thought about the journey that had brought them here. 5 years ago, The idea of entering a boundary zone was just a theory. A crazy theory that most scientists had laughed at. He remembered the day Dr. Ben Crawford had presented his proposal to the Earth Space Agency. Crawford was a theoretical physicist with wild white hair and a habit of scribbling equations on any flat surface he could find. He had stood in front of a room full of skeptical officials and explained something that sounded like madness. The boundary zones break physics, Crawford had said. Every species in the galaxy has tried to adapt to that. They build ships that can survive changing gravity. They create shields against time distortion. They try to understand the rules inside the zones and work within them. And they all fail, because the zones are deadly, one official had replied. You cannot adapt to something that kills you instantly. Exactly, Crawford had said with a grin. So we stopped trying to adapt. Instead, we bring our own rules with us. He had called it the anchor drive. The concept was simple in theory, but incredibly complex in practice. The drive created a bubble around the ship where Earth's physics remained constant. Gravity worked normally. Time flowed correctly. Light behaved as expected. The ship essentially carried its own little piece of reality wherever it went. We do not adjust to their universe, Crawford had explained. We force our universe to exist around us. Other species had never thought of this approach because their science was too advanced. They understood that physics was universal. They knew that the laws of nature applied everywhere. The idea of simply ignoring those laws and creating your own local version seemed childish and impossible. But humans had a long history of doing childish and impossible things. The anchor drive had taken 3 years to build and another 2 years to test. There have been failures and setbacks. Equipment exploded. Theories proved wrong. But piece by piece, the team had made it work. And now here they were, sailing through a region of space where no living being had ever survived. Captain, Emma suddenly said, her voice sharp with surprise. I am getting clearer readings on the central structure. You need to see this. Sam walked to her station and looked at the display. The structure appeared as a wireframe model, slowly filling in with detail as their sensors gathered more data. It was enormous, at least 50 kilometers across. Its shape was wrong in ways that hurt to look at. Angles that should not connect did connect. Surfaces curved in directions that did not exist in normal space. What is it? Sam asked. I do not know, Emma admitted. But look at this. She pointed to a series of readings. These energy patterns are artificial. This structure was built by someone. And based on the decay rates I'm measuring, it is at least 5 million years old. Sam felt a chill run down his spine. 5 million years ago, most species in the Galactic Council had not yet developed stone tools. Whatever had built this structure was older than anyone had imagined. There's more, Emma continued. The boundary zone itself is not natural. The energy readings suggest it is being generated by the structure. Someone created this zone on purpose. Why? Lisa asked from her station. Why would anyone create a region of space that kills everything that enters? Maybe to keep something out, Jake suggested. Or to keep something in. They all thought about that possibility in silence. A prison made of broken physics. A cage that no one could escape, because escaping required traveling through impossible space. Whatever the reason, Sam finally said, we need to find out. This is the biggest discovery in human history. Maybe in galactic history. He returned to his command chair and looked at the twisted stars on the main screen. Somewhere ahead, an ancient structure waited with secrets that might change everything. Behind them, the Galactic Council waited with doubt and disbelief. Sam intended to answer both. All stations, maintain course, he ordered. We came here to learn the truth. Let us go find it. The Endeavor pushed forward, a small bubble of human reality moving through a sea of chaos, toward something that had waited in the dark for 5 million years. The observation deck of Velen Prime Station was packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. They stood behind reinforced windows that looked out at the swirling chaos of Boundary Zone 7. The zone appeared as a wall of impossible colors and shifting shapes, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. High Arbiter Zorvan stood at the front of the crowd, his 4 eyes fixed on the boundary. Beside him, Chancellor Crithan clicked his mandibles in what passed for impatience among his species. "We've been waiting for 6 hours, Crithan complained. "The human ship is not coming. It was destroyed like every other vessel that entered a boundary zone." "The scheduled time has not yet arrived," Zorvan replied, though he privately shared the Chancellor's doubts. "We will wait." Ambassador Megan Clark stood nearby, her face calm despite the pressure she felt. The entire reputation of her species rested on what happened in the next few minutes. If the Endeavor did not appear, humanity would become a joke throughout the galaxy. The species that lied about conquering the impossible. She checked her personal communicator for the 100th time. The last message from Captain Harris had come 3 hours ago. Everything was on schedule, he had said. They would emerge on time. 1 minute to scheduled arrival, announced a Velthari technician monitoring the sensors. The crowd grew quiet. Even Crethan stopped his clicking. Every eye turned to the boundary zone, watching for any sign of change. 30 seconds passed. Then 45. "Nothing," Crethan said with satisfaction in his voice. "As I predicted, the humans have." The boundary zone rippled. A pulse of light exploded outward, and from the center of the chaos, a ship emerged. The Endeavor burst through the wall of broken physics like a swimmer breaking the surface of water. Its hull was scorched and its lights flickered, but it was intact. It was whole. It was alive. The observation deck erupted in noise. Delegates shouted in shock and disbelief. Some species made sounds that their translators could not process. A Velthari scientist simply fainted. Zorvan stared at the ship with all 4 of his eyes wide open. In 300 years, he had never seen anything like this. His instruments confirmed what his eyes told him. A human vessel had entered a boundary zone and returned. "Velen Prime, this is the Endeavor." Captain Harris's voice came through the communication system, requesting permission to dock. "We have a lot to share with the Council." Zorvan had to try twice before he could speak. "Permission granted, Endeavor. We will meet you at Docking Bay 4. An hour later, the main council chamber was fuller than it had ever been. Every species had sent additional representatives. News networks from 100 worlds broadcast live feeds. The moment felt historic because everyone knew it was. Captain Sam Harris stood at the central platform where Zorvan usually stood. Behind him, a massive holographic display showed the data they had collected. Beside him stood Dr. Emma Collins, ready to explain the technical details. "Thank you for allowing us to address the Council," Sam began. His voice was steady and confident. "I know that many of you believed our mission was impossible. I understand that doubt. Before we developed our technology, we believed the same thing." He gestured, and the display changed to show a diagram of the anchor drive. "This is what made our journey possible. We call it the anchor drive. Instead of trying to survive inside the boundary zone's physics, we created our own local physics. Our ship carries a bubble of normal space around it. Inside that bubble, reality works the way it should." Dr. Collins stepped forward. "The concept is based on a simple idea. Physics is not one universal set of rules. It is a local condition. Earth has certain physical constants. Gravity works a certain way. Light moves at a certain speed. These constants exist because of our specific location in the universe." She changed the display to show the boundary zone itself, The boundary zones override local physics with chaos. Every other species has tried to adapt to that chaos. We chose a different approach. We simply refuse to acknowledge it. Our drive projects Earth's physical constants outward, creating a space where chaos cannot exist. Crethan rose from his seat. This is impossible. You cannot simply ignore the laws of physics. We are not ignoring them, Emma replied. We are replacing them. Inside our anchor field, we follow Earth's laws. The zone's laws do not apply because we do not let them apply. That makes no sense, another delegate shouted. Physics is universal, is it? Sam asked. The boundary zones prove that physics can be different in different places. If that is true, then physics is not universal. It is local. And if it is local, it can be changed. The chamber fell into confused murmuring. The concept was so foreign to the established scientific thinking of older species that many struggled to understand it. They had spent millions of years studying the universe as it was. The idea of forcing the universe to be different went against everything they believed. There's more, Sam continued. We reached the central structure inside the boundary zone. And what we found changes everything. The display shifted to show the ancient structure. Its impossible geometry filled the screen, making several delegates look away in discomfort. This structure is approximately 5 million years old. It was built by a species we have never encountered, and it is the source of the boundary zone itself. Zorvan stepped forward, his silver face pale with shock. Are you saying the boundary zones are artificial? Yes, Sam confirmed. Someone created them. On purpose. The zones are not natural phenomena. They are constructions. And based on the energy signatures we detected, they were built to contain something. Contain what? Zorvan demanded. We do not know yet, Sam admitted. The structure was inactive during our visit, but our data suggests it has a purpose beyond simply existing. The zones are barriers, high arbiter, walls built to keep something locked away. The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates argued with each other and with their own advisors. The implications were enormous. If the boundary zones were prisons, what were they imprisoning? And if human technology could penetrate these prisons, what might escape? Megan Clark watched the chaos with mixed feelings. Humanity had proven itself today. They had done what no other species could do. But she could see fear in the eyes of many delegates. Fear of humans and what they might unleash. She hoped that fear would not become something more dangerous. The Endeavour departed for its second journey into Boundary Zone 7 with a crew that was only half human. Captain Sam Harris had agreed to carry observers from the Galactic Council. It was a gesture of openness, a way to prove that humanity had nothing to hide. Among the observers was Velen, a young Velthari scientist with curious eyes and endless questions. Unlike most of his species, he did not view humans with contempt. He viewed them with fascination. Your approach to engineering is remarkable, Velen said as he watched Lieutenant Jake Morton work on the anchor drive controls. You do not try to perfect your designs before using them. You build something functional and then improve it while it operates. Jake laughed as he adjusted a power coupling. Perfect is the enemy of good enough. If we waited until everything was perfect, we would never launch anything. But that is so inefficient, Velen said. You waste resources on failed attempts. We call those learning experiences, Jake replied. Every failure teaches us something. And eventually, all those lessons add up to success. Velen considered this. His people planned everything in advance. They calculated every possibility before taking action. The idea of deliberately accepting failure as part of the process seemed wasteful and strange. But he could not argue with the results. Humans were inside a boundary zone while his people had never survived the attempt. In another part of the ship, Commander Dreth of the Marvaki Collective moved through the corridors with purpose. He was large even for his species, with a shell of dark green that reflected no light. His orders were clear and came directly from the highest levels of his government. Human technology was too dangerous to exist. The Marvaki had ruled a significant portion of the galaxy through military strength for over 50,000 years. They maintained that position by ensuring no other species could threaten them. Humans with their impossible technology represented exactly that kind of threat. Dreth found the secondary anchor drive control station. It was unmanned because the humans trusted their guests. That trust, we thought, was a weakness. He removed a small device from a hidden pocket in his shell. It was designed to overload the anchor drive at a critical moment. The ship would be stranded inside the boundary zone. The humans would die. The technology would be lost. And the Marvaki would remain supreme. He attached the device and covered his work. No one would notice until it was too late. 3 hours later, the Endeavor approached the ancient structure at the heart of the boundary zone. The impossible geometry filled the main view screen, and even the alien observers fell silent at the sight. Beginning final approach, Lisa Tanner announced from navigation. Anchor field stable at 94%. Captain Harris nodded and looked at the structure with wonder. On their first visit, it had been dark and dormant. Now, faint lights flickered across its surface. Something had changed. "I am detecting increased energy activity," Dr. Emma Collins reported. "The structure appears to be waking up." "Waking up?" Valen asked with alarm in his voice. Before Emma could answer, the ship shuddered. Warning lights flashed across every console. Jake Morton shouted in surprise and began running diagnostics. "Anchor field destabilizing," he reported. "We are losing containment." Reality began to bleed into the ship. Through the walls, the crew could see glimpses of impossible things. Colors that should not exist. Shapes that hurt the mind. Time itself seemed to stutter, with seconds repeating and then jumping forward. What is happening? Commander Dreth demanded, hiding his satisfaction behind a mask of concern. "Someone sabotaged the secondary control station," Jake announced. His voice was tight with controlled anger. "The power couplings are feeding back into each other. If I cannot stop it, the whole drive will collapse." Harris turned to look at Dreth. The Marvaki commander's body language was too calm, too prepared for this emergency. The captain had led crews for 30 years. He knew guilt when he saw it. "Commander, step away from that console," Harris ordered. Dreth hissed and dropped all pretense. "It does not matter now. Your ship is dying. Your technology will be lost. The natural order will be preserved. Security, restrain the commander," Harris ordered. Then he turned to his crew. "Everyone, focus on your jobs. We are not dead yet." What happened next shocked the alien observers more than anything else they had witnessed. The humans did not panic. They did not argue or blame each other. They simply worked. Jake Morton crawled into a maintenance shaft and began rerouting power by hand. Lisa Tanner fought against controls that kept changing as reality shifted around her. Emma Collins calculated new field parameters, while her instruments gave her impossible readings. "I need more power to the primary emitters," Jake shouted from somewhere inside the walls. "Rerouting from life support," another crew member responded. "We can hold our breath." "Navigation is gone," Lisa reported. "I am flying by visual reference." "Then open your eyes wider," Harris replied. "You can do this." Velen watched in amazement. His people would have followed procedures. They would have consulted manuals and checked protocols. These humans were improvising, making decisions in seconds that should have taken hours of committee discussion. and it was working. Slowly, the anchor field stabilized. The glimpses of chaos faded. The ship stopped shaking. Jake emerged from the maintenance shaft, covered in burns and grease, but grinning. "Field holding at 68%, he reported. "Not great, but enough." "Good work," Harris said. He turned to look at Commander Dreth, who was now restrained by security officers. "You tried to kill us. You failed. Humans are stubborn that way." "You do not understand," Dreth replied. "If your technology spreads, everything changes. The balance of power that has existed for millennia will collapse." "Maybe that balance needed to collapse," Harris said quietly. The ship's sensors suddenly screamed with new alarms. Emma looked at her display with wide eyes. "Captain, the structure. It is fully active now, and something is moving inside it." Through the view screen, they could see lights spreading across the ancient construction. Deep within its impossible geometry, something vast was stirring. Something that had waited for 5 million years. The prison was waking up. And so was the prisoner. The ancient structure blazed with light. Energy pulsed through its impossible corridors, like blood through veins. The Endeavor hung before it, small and fragile against something built when the galaxy was young. Then a voice spoke. It came from every speaker on the ship, every translator, every device capable of producing sound. It was not loud, but it carried the weight of ages. "You have come. After 5 million years, someone has finally come." Captain Harris stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I am the last guardian of the architects. I was created to watch over this prison and to wait for those who might repair it. I had lost hope that anyone would ever arrive." "The architects," Emma Collins said with wonder in her voice. "The species that built the boundary zones." "Yes, my creators understood that the universe contains things that should not exist. Entities that live outside normal space and time. Beings of chaos that consume order wherever they find it. The architects built the boundary zones to contain these entities, to lock them away where they could not harm the developing civilizations of the galaxy." Velen stepped forward, his 4 eyes wide. "We have studied the boundary zones for 10,000 years. We never knew they were prisons." "You were not meant to know," the Guardian replied. "The zones were designed to be impassable. Any species that tried to enter would die, and thus the secret would remain safe. But the barriers are failing. After 5 million years, the energy that maintains them is running low. Soon, the prisoners will escape." "How soon?" Harris asked. "Within your lifetime. Perhaps within years. The entity contained in this zone has been pressing against its walls for centuries. It senses the weakness. It is almost free." As if to prove the Guardian's words, the structure shuddered. Through the view screen, they could see reality tearing at the edges of the construction. Something dark and vast moved in those tiers. Something that made the human mind want to look away. "Can we stop it?" Harris asked. "That is why I have hoped for your arrival. Your technology is unique. You do not adapt to physics. You impose physics. This is exactly what is needed to repair the barriers." The Guardian projected data to the Endeavor's computers. Emma studied it with growing understanding. "The boundary zones need a permanent anchor," she said. "A constant source of stable physics to reinforce the walls. Our drive could provide that, but it would need to operate continuously, forever." "The ship would be trapped here," Jake Morton said quietly. "The drive cannot be separated from the vessel. If we do this, we lose the Endeavor." Harris looked at his crew. He saw fear in their faces, but also determination. They understood what was at stake. Not just their lives, but the lives of every being in the galaxy. "Begin evacuation," he ordered. "Transfer all personnel to the Observer shuttle. I will stay to operate the drive manually." "Captain, no. Lisa objected. The system can be automated. Maybe, but if something goes wrong, someone needs to be here to fix it. Someone needs to make sure this works. The dark thing in the structure pressed harder against its prison. Reality screamed in response. They were out of time for debate. Move, Harris ordered. That is a command. The evacuation happened quickly. Crew members grabbed essential data and ran for the shuttle bay. The alien observers went with them, guided by humans who remained calm even as their world fell apart. Jake Morton was the last crew member to leave. He stood at the door to the bridge and looked back at his captain. The drive is set, sir. When you overload the anchor field, it will create a permanent zone of stable physics. The barrier will hold. Thank you, Lieutenant. For everything. Jake nodded once, then ran for the shuttle. Harris watched him go, then turned to face the view screen alone. Guardian, he said. I am ready. Your species is remarkable, the Guardian replied. You achieve what others cannot because you refuse to believe in impossible things. The architects would have admired you. Let us hope that admiration is worth something. Harris began the overload sequence. The anchor drive hummed with increasing power. The bubble of stable physics around the ship began to expand, pushing outward against the chaos of the boundary zone dot in the structure. The dark entity realized what was happening. It threw itself against the weakening walls with desperate fury. Reality tore and healed and tore again. Come on, Harris muttered as he adjusted the controls. Just a little more. The drive reached critical levels. The expanding field of stable physics touched the structure's walls and began to reinforce them. The tears in reality closed. The dark thing screamed without, sound as its escape route disappeared. The shuttle carrying the crew and observers had reached the edge of the boundary zone. Through their windows, they watched the Endeavour blaze with light. Then the ship exploded. Not with fire and debris, but with pure stable reality. A wave of normal physics expanded from the vessel's last position and merged with the boundary zone's walls. Where there had been weakness, now there was strength. The ancient prison was sealed. The entity was contained. The galaxy was saved. Emma Collins stood at the shuttle's window with tears running down her face. Behind her, Valen and the other observers watched in stunned silence. 1 week later, the Galactic Council met in full session. The chamber was silent as High Arbiter Zovan took the central platform. We have confirmed the Endeavor's final action, he announced. The boundary zone has stabilized. Energy readings suggest it will remain intact for millions of years. The threat has been contained. He paused and looked at Ambassador Megan Clark. One human gave his life to save every species in this galaxy. We have studied the boundary zones for millennia. We sent our best scientists and bravest explorers. All of them died accomplishing nothing. Humans arrived, and within months they did what we could not do in 10,000 years. Krethon, the Morvaki Chancellor, remained silent. His government had recalled Commander Dreth in disgrace. The plot to sabotage human technology now seemed foolish and petty compared to what humans had achieved. The Council formally recognizes humanity as an essential partner in galactic affairs, Zovan continued. Not as a junior species. Not as newcomers to be tolerated. As equals who have earned that status through sacrifice. Megan stepped forward to accept the recognition. She thought of Sam Harris and his steady voice and his absolute refusal to let the universe tell him what was possible. Thank you, High Arbiter, she said. But I must correct one thing. You asked earlier how we defied your laws of physics. How we did what everyone said could not be done. She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species who had doubted humanity for so long. The answer is simple. We never agreed to follow those laws in the first place. The universe told us what was impossible. We chose not to listen. And we never will. In a laboratory back on Earth, Dr. Emma Collins and Lieutenant Jake Morton stood before a new set of blueprints. The next generation of anchored technology. More powerful, more efficient, capable of reaching places no one had ever imagined. Where do you think we should go next? Jake asked. Emma smiled. Everywhere. We have an entire universe to explore. And somewhere in the depths of space, other boundary zones waited with their own secrets. Other prisons holding other things. Other impossible challenges that humans would face with the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had arrived. And nothing would ever be the same again.